Good, let's get it started. Our first speaker will be Eugenia McNaughton. She's from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and she's going to kick it off with an overview of quality assessment and corrective action overview. Eugenia?
Good morning, everyone. Nice to see you all. It seems like it's as full a house as it was yesterday, and I was over there. So I decided to say I'm going to stay over there to see, but it really works very well. I'm happy with the arrangement, and I hope that you were all very comfortable too and got all the messages we gave. Lots of messages. I'm really amazed at how much there is to know about air quality and air quality monitoring. I have to, full disclosure, my degree is in water and algae, and I'm the head of the QA office at EPA, but Matt Plate has dragged me into this business. And to think, it's like, okay, we need water. We know how many days you can go without having good water to drink, but how many minutes can you go without good air? So it's a wake-up call, and yet it's something that I think the folks in the world don't really take as seriously as they do water. But good to see you all here, and I know you do. So I'm going to talk about the kind of, the jackbooted thugs in the helicopter part when assessments are done. So all of this work is that you've been doing so carefully, and then folks come from ARB or they come from EPA and they look over your shoulder. So what is that all about? So the first thing I'm going to do is define assessment. We're going to have kind of two kinds of assessment. Mike mentioned what's going to happen in the afternoon, the AQS part of the assessment. But I'm going to be talking about internal and external assessment. I guess I can look right over here. So what's the purpose? Why do we torture you this way? You're just doing your job, leave me alone. But really, what are the benefits of doing assessments? And then what happens after the assessment? People come and go in a flash. They take a look at you over a couple of days. What then? And then finally, the message, which I think has been given over and over and will be given again, is working together. Understanding what each part of the process, where that little data point runs across, how you touch it, everybody touches it, and how you need to talk together about what's happening there. So first, the assessing data versus assessing data quality. And by assessing data, I mean sort of the left-hand side of the screen. For that, when EPA looks at what they can put into AQS, that will go then towards planning and looking at compliance issues, completeness is critical. I think you'll see an exercise regarding that. Usability, Reggie talked about it very, I think very forcefully. Usability versus, how do you use your data? Data qualifiers. There's it's like learning a whole new language, data qualifiers, very impressive. But that's the next topic. I'm going to talk about general oversight. That's what we do when we come and visit you. When we find a missing data point, we hang on to that and we want to follow that process. So before we come, we take a look and we ask you about those things. If there are abrupt changes, I think that Mark Stolting really gave an excellent presentation looking at those graphs and saying, well, what happened here and here and here? It's like a really interesting, mysterious process, but very useful to look at. And then bottom line is we want continuous improvement. So that's where we're really looking for everybody, and it means you're the regulators as well. How can we improve our programs? And we learn from you at the same time. So why do them? So the first reason, and it's a really good one, is that they're required. And I have to say that the Clean Air Act is the best Environmental Act, as far as I'm concerned, because that's the only one where it says you got to do QA and you got to do oversight. It doesn't say, well, you might do this and you might do that, and let's suggest. No, 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 you got to do it. And it is indeed because it's so complicated and just so complicated to measure air and know really where the effects are, et cetera. So good, it's there, but it's there only to help us. It helps us identify and correct any deficiencies so that you want to prevent them. You don't want to call out people, you want to say, hey, what can we do to help you prevent this? It focuses your attention on corrective action. So we don't come back every 3 years, as is our requirement, and say, hey, we talked about this 3 years ago. You get moving on it. It strengthens, of course, the defensibility of what you think is going on, and what decisions get made as a result of what you think is going on in the air. It allows you to review your policies and practices. Somebody asked yesterday, do we really have to, like, who said we have to review our SOPs every 3 years? Well, that's really, it's not it is, let's just say it's a requirement. What it means is, take a look at your SOPs. Don't wait 3 years. Things change, people change. You put something down on an SOP, it didn't work as well as you thought it was going to work, or something changed, your instrument changed. You need to change what you're telling people they should do. You might not be there to help them with that, they need to have it. So that's the reason to do that kind of looking, but you tend not to do it unless somebody reminds you. And finally, it's what we do for you then is provide an independent verification that your data are credible, that that little data point didn't get smudged along the way, it's got integrity, and that your data are as complete as possible. So this is the part that's your job, is the internal part. So and we really have talked about that over the day. The plan, do, check, act. I would be remiss as a quality assurance person if I didn't mention that little mantra and the little cycling of, you do it, you look at it first before you go out, you check on what's going on, you do it, you check on it, and then you make your changes as a result of what you've found out, and then you go back again, you start your planning. So that's implicit in all the work that all of you do at every level. It includes field QCs, what you should be looking at, site maintenance. We've talked about those trees that tend to grow. It started out as a little bush, and by golly, it just got too much nutrients in that groundwater and grew too fast. You got to do something about that. Data review and validation. That's what you do what's done in the field is going to move along. Are people talking to one another about anything that might have come up that would inform that the sort of the little cloud around that data point. So finally, internal audits give you a good level of internal review, and you're not waiting around for people to come and tell you what they find that they have questions about. But we do have that job. So first, you'll hear this morning a lot of very interesting and amusing, I have to say, presentations about what ARB does in terms of somebody coming from the outside. And you probably know people well enough to think they're not the outside anymore. But they have a performance evaluation annual visit, so that just happens at every district. Then anyone can initiate a corrective action notification, and you'll hear about that. Again, in a very, well, it's a can, what can I say? You'll see that. And then discussion of the air quality data action. So how these things get reviewed and followed up within the PQAO, within the ARB PQAO organization. But then EPA comes around every 3 years, and we don't go to every district, but we try to visit different districts every time we do come around to do a CARB assessment. And we're looking at the technical system. It's called Maria will also talk about it as a technical system audit. I thought that was our special term. It's a programmatic overview. So we look at everything we take the network plan and all the QA documents that should be up to date and are very important for us because they are against which we look at your program and your SOPs. As I said, we do site visits, so we keep ourselves a little bit honest, and that is to say, do some work in the field, something we love, but have gotten pretty far away from. And then finally look at your data management systems to see that they are working and that there's communication between what goes on in the field and what goes down in electronic data systems. I was going to say paper, but that's a bad word. Benefits of assessment, we think, and be happy to hear any other issues people have. It promotes consistency within the network, so you know that what people are doing, granted, every district is different and has different conditions, but at least you know the way you're testing things, the way you're looking at things, the requirements that you have are all the same, and that you're doing them as appropriate to your district, but with consistency within the greater organization. And you get to pay attention to data quality and the data collection process. I think we tend to, I do anyway, just sort of, I'm coming into work, I'm doing my job, I know how to do my job, don't bother me, on the one hand. But in fact, it really is very helpful to have somebody ask you, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? Well, I don't know, that's my job. This process makes you think a little bit more. It makes you take that time that otherwise, you guys are really busy. You don't always have that time. But this makes you take the time. We can all use that. So it helps everyone understand the roles and responsibilities. And it reduces, finally, the possibility of any legal challenges to decisions that are made, which is really the sort of the end of the pipe, if you will, but the critical piece. So what are you doing with this information? We're using it to make sure that we protect public health. That's what we're doing with this information. And when somebody comes and says, well, why, this is going to cost me money. Well, sorry, folks, here's the whole train, and here's why we made that decision. Oh, okay, I guess I can't challenge that. It's a very nice feeling. But after we've come and gone, we send out, we do at any rate at EPA, and we try, and Maria will talk about this too, we try very hard to get the reports out, draft reports out to the PQAOs as fast as possible, which is like on a slow train sometimes. But you have the right then to ask, to make any corrections that we might have misunderstood things, or we might have some wrong information, wrong spellings, whatever. So it is a back and forth to really underscore the fact that this is an iterative process. People who might feel uncomfortable talking to within their organization can come, if you have somebody coming from the outside, the quote-unquote outside, be it headquarters, CARB, or EPA, we sometimes hear some things that we can then perhaps clarify and help people understand better. Your CAN process will, as you'll see, really does that as well. Very often we find that QA documentation isn't current, and it's been a wonderfully painful but rewarding process to see everybody working on it and saying at the end, hey, it really was a useful exercise to go through and make sure that what we say we're doing, we really are doing, we understand why, and if we've changed things, this is why, and this is our current operation, because that's against which we look at your organization. Sometimes, however, our headquarters guidance can be very unclear. So we're here, and ARB is there to sort of work our way through that and to hear what you have to say about those guidances and take that back to headquarters and have them work on it. So again, iterative process. And then any public challenges to the information that's your data is put up, like almost immediately with Air Now. So you really have a very good reason to want to know where your data coming from, what those things mean at every level. Everybody should be able to at least be able to articulate the process that's gone through that got that data point up on our website for the public to see. And one of the benefits that we've really seen has come from the way one of my staff has taken some of this information. So it's Steve Romali, his name is down at the bottom, and that is the way you spell quicker. That was a big issue. It's a Lotus-based platform without an E, and Steve is the keeper of it. And what he's been doing is, when he went around and looked at laboratory issues, he went home, came back to the office and said, well, how can I help? I see these things in several laboratories. It seems like there might be an issue here. How can I help to sort of bring light to what the cause is? And one of the things that we're so all of these things, which he can talk to you about, and you can look up on the Quicker site, are things that he has found in doing round-robin performance evaluation tests. But one very sort of pragmatic thing is finding out that the canisters that people use for NATS and PAMS program really need a more rigorous cleaning. It's like, that seems pretty trivial, but it's something that, like, throughout the environmental chemistry history has been extremely important. And it used to be that people would go into their chem labs smoking their cigarettes, you know, and using it, and you'd like to do it again. No. And so a lot of the information that we got was like tainted with cigarette atmospheric deposition of whatever. So we're a lot more careful. And again, with air monitoring, because of the complexity of it and the difficulty of really knowing that you're analyzing what you intended to analyze, Steve's work has been, I think, extremely, extremely helpful to many of the districts as a result. So I'm particularly pleased that we came in our helicopters, but we turned off our motors, or we're using only, you know, like diesel fuel from, what do you call it, from fast food restaurants. Anyway, just kidding. So things are coming. We're constantly trying to improve the situation, and all of these issues, some of them are headquarters driven, some of them are things that we would like to see or are trying to work towards. So very importantly, improved communication at all levels, and things on the website so that you can ask questions, you can ask them anonymously or not. Things that occur to you, write them down on that famous back of the napkin. But one thing I thought was very specific, and I hope I have the right person now, is there's a new procedure, new protocol for canister cleaning that's happening at ARB. And I'm not going to mention any names in case I'm wrong, but we think it's Brenda, who's the culprit here, as a result of the work that we were able to do with all the districts and all the round robins and seeing where the issues lay. Okay, so the take-home message, and you're going to hear this throughout the day, really emphasize it, and hope you go home feeling really rah-rah about the team that you all are on. But data collectors and validators, we did that, worked on that yesterday, should be in regular communication. So it goes from making sure you're writing all the information out around a data point, and that you're doing it as efficiently as possible so that the person who's seeing the information can understand and can get back to you, knows who did it, et cetera, can ask those questions, that the collector and the assessor aren't the same person if you can possibly help it. Again, we know small districts have issues that way, but just to have another pair of eyes looking at something as someone who isn't doing your job. The collectors and assessors, and that's all of us, we have to work as partners. That's how we see our work. It's a lot more pleasant, frankly, that way. And we get the result that we want, because our common goal is appropriate. And I don't like to talk about bad and good data. It's either appropriate for what you're doing or not. So that's the bottom line, and the reason is that we want to be using that information when we're sending it off to people who need to use it to make good decisions about, in that case, I'll use the word good and bad, good decisions about public health and the environment. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to, questions? Do you have any questions? Are there any questions? Yes? Oh, yeah.
What is special about 3 years? Not 4, not 2.
Well, so, for example, the quality management plan is a 5-year effort. We figure that's the oversight, maybe that changes less often. 3 years, with an SOP, I think, and also with a program plan or a project plan, things change more rapidly. I was just thinking about, we have SOPs in our office. And we have this very complicated process of reviewing plans, and then we send it off to the air quality analysis office to have them do a check-off. So that are there any issues that we were not consistent about? And then we go to the project officer and have that person check off, were there any program issues with the grants that we're missing, that we're stating something erroneously in our memo, in our QA memo. These things change. I mean, we wrote it, I think we changed it 4 times over the last 2 years to perfect it. Instruments change. Regulations come out that you have to follow. It doesn't, 3 years is a more reasonable way, but really what we like, and I'm talking to myself as well, is that you look at your documents once a year and just, okay, it's time to look at all of the things we say we do. Are we doing them? You don't have to then send them back to us and have us submit and approve them every year. That would be a horrible thought. But every 3 years at least have somebody else look at them. We think it's just a good, like a reasonable, rational time frame. It's not in stone. But again, I would say that the really hidden message is you should be looking at these anytime you think there's a change that's substantial, or it's time to look at our QMP and QA, all our QA documents and SOPs, to see if they really reflect what we're doing now. Any other questions? Okay,